Welcome to Session Sunday. Hi guys, it's Jack Edwards, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at switch and play to score. But before we get into this week's video, make sure to leave us a like and subscribe, and if you missed last week's video, click on the link above. Okay, so moving into the first part of this week's session, we're going to be looking at a pattern of play which is focusing on switch and play to score. Okay, but before we get into it, let's have a look at how many players we're working with this week and the equipment that we'll be using. So in terms of players, we've got 15 players overall, okay, 14 outfield players and a goalkeeper, but we can adapt that for more and less players, which we'll get into once we start. In terms of the equipment for this week, we're looking at balls, bibs and cones, and then if you have poles or mannequins as well, that would be great for the first part of the session, okay, to try and emphasise the movement to get away from the defenders. In terms of the setup for this part of the session, in terms of the depth, from the goal line, okay, to the start point is going to be 20 yards. From the start point to these middle players is 15, so we're looking about 10 yards to these players, and then it's going to be a further 15 yards to the deepest player here as well. Okay, so we're looking at 50 yards of depth. In terms of width, centrally between these two players, we're looking at 20 yards and then 15 either side, so 50 yards of depth as well. If you have that, okay, if you have less, you just have to make it a little bit tighter, okay, which means the players it's encouraging them to move a little bit more. Because it's unopposed, you can kind of get away with it a little bit. So if you do have less space or you're working with younger players, you can decrease that size a little bit. So how it's going to work, okay, we have two start points, this side and this side. Okay, so you can swap over after a certain amount of time. We're focusing on moving the ball to one area to switch the play, and then we're going to give the players two options once the ball comes into the middle, okay, which we'll speak about in a second. So the ball starts here. We're playing on the outside of this pole or cone, okay, to then play back across, okay. This player then looks to meet the ball, okay, with this player then moving around. The player who receives it here back, who's at the start point, looks to play high, okay, so we're playing into centre-back, holding midfielder, who's then the trigger to switch the play, okay, so we've moved that ball quickly to then switch the play wide. When this ball moves wide, okay, we're looking for this player to play first time into the middle, so a striker, attack midfielder, can even be a winger as well. We've then got two options. We can either set the ball in behind, so for a 1-2 for this player to make the movement, so they want to make that movement anyway, okay? So we can set that in there, which then means we play a little cutback, okay, for the player out here to finish. Or when we play this 1-2 here, when the ball gets played in, because this player is making a run, okay, it can be as if there's a defender here, okay, or a defender here as if it's going to be in a game, okay, because we're trying to move the ball away from that defender. It can be that open out on the back foot, this player can make a run and they can get slid in, okay, to go 1v1 and finish. So it's up to the players what they do, but the movements are still going to be the same. Once this wide player plays in, they're looking to get in behind, okay, and then this player is looking to receive the ball. So then when this player opens out, create the space to receive it, so hold the line, to stay on side, go in, and then finish. We'll then go from the opposite side, but in terms of movement, the players are just moving up one each time. So the player at the start point moves to be the setter here. Player who's been the setter moves up to be the player who switches the play. Player who switches play goes out wide. Player who is wide becomes the attack midfielder, and the attack midfielder goes to be the striker, with the striker going to the back of the queue. So again, we're starting here, starting on this side, play in, play back, play up. So again, focus on that movement to receive it on the back foot and open out, okay, with the players making their movements up. Play out to the wide player who's looking to receive it, setting, and then instantly looking to move on the outside. This player's then got the option to either open out and slide it in for a finish, or play in behind for this player to meet the ball, cut it back, and then finish first time, with the players again moving up one each time, so the players get to have a go in each position before going back to the start point. And then after a certain amount of time, you can then look to switch it over. If you have less players, it can even be that the players can just, let's say if you had two less players, okay, because teams are alternating, okay, it can be that player just joins the back of the queue and you don't have a player waiting. Simple as that. Because they're going one at a time, you'll be able to get away with that. Okay, if you have more players, just add more players in as well to the start point here. Okay, and you can even look to maybe even put a defender in as well, or somebody pretending to be a defender before they then go and be the attacker. We will now move into our first animation before moving on to part 2 of this week's session. Okay, now moving into part 2 of this week's session, we're now focusing on a possession-based small-sided game, which is again focusing to score, but this time focusing on recycling the ball, okay, to create space to penetrate and then look to score, okay? So in terms of the setup for this part of the session, in terms of width, we're going 40 yards total, 20 yards centrally, 10 yards either side, and then in terms of depth, it just depends on how many players that you have got. So these two areas here, you're looking about 20 yards each, okay? And then this area here, 15 yards. So about 55 yards. But again, you can increase and decrease that depending on the players. And then once it goes, you start removing the zones, okay? You can maybe look to decrease it then. So try and take a little bit more space out because it will be a little bit long for 6v6. So the two players on the outside look to combine with the team in possession. One team's attacking the goal, one team's attacking here. The players are free to move in between the zones. It's just to encourage the movement so all players aren't staying in the same areas and trying to crowd around the ball. So the Blues are looking to move possession to get the ball in here. They have to get the ball into this zone before they play forward into here. And the Greens are looking to win it back and then score in there. So a couple of different variations. It could just be that the Greens attack there and the Blues attack there for a set amount of time. Or it could be that the Blues carry on attacking here, okay, and keep possession every time they score. And then the Greens have to win it back and scoring a big goal to then transition and become the team in possession with 1 point scoring when you're scoring here, 1 point scoring when you go in there. So again, you've got the goalkeeper to use in possession as well. So we can start with the coach or the goalkeeper playing into the Blues. So as you can see here, you've got a 2v1. As the defender split, you might get a player coming in looking to receive the ball in the space, okay? But what we're trying to focus on is if that the opposition press, we're recycling the ball by switch and play, okay, which can then create options to then move forward, okay, because then can we see players moving off the ball, okay, they can drive into this area or they can receive and then look to play forward. So again, it's setting that tempo and intensity early, minimising the touches, our receiving skills, moving that ball quickly, and our movement both on and off the ball. So we've got to think about attacking principles as well, our height, width and depth. So we're getting our width with the floaters here, okay, our height and depth comes from the players in the low and the high zones, okay, and then we're looking for this middle area. So when the ball's in here, can we focus on switching the play, so playing round the opposition to then play in, and then can we get forward runners beyond the ball? Can we get players stretching the pitch, okay? These floaters can come in all the boxes as well, okay, so then we can even play into them, to play in again, and then play forward. So for the Greens, it can be, do they stay compact and look to frustrate, or when the ball goes in, do they go to press, okay, which could result in winning the ball high, but also it could result in, if they press too much and they leave space in behind, we can play in easily, okay, and then go and attack as a team, as in the Blues, to then play into the goals, okay. So for the Blues though, it's trying to play forward but recognising when to stay patient as well. So if the Greens are staying compact, so they're going to have body behind the ball, okay, move the ball quickly, okay, once we move the ball, can we look to get out, can we get players dropping in? If the options aren't on to play forward, maintain possession by switch and play, then look to create the gaps. We can then find that bounce pass in there to then play forward. So it's taking risks and getting players forward, okay, getting players up the pitch, not just thinking, right, I'm in this zone to start with, I'm going to stay in here. We've got to provide support for the player on the ball. So when the ball does go into this area, can we get players moving around it, which then encourages our chances to play forward and score. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to the final part of this week's session. Okay, now moving into the final part of this week's session, we're now focusing on an attacking-based small-sided game. Again, focusing on switching the play to then go and attack. In terms of the setup, so final third's going to be 20 yards. Okay, this area here is going to be between. It depends on how many numbers you got. Okay, so with it being 6 versus 5, you can do between 25 and 30 yards. Again, depending on numbers, it can be increased as well, and age group. And then the end zone here is just going to be 5 yards. In terms of the width, okay, we're going to go with 30 yards to start with, but if it needs to be increased, it can. But you want it to be quite tight so that the player's going to move the ball quickly. So the players are locked into their areas until the ball goes into the final third. The only player that isn't, okay, is like the Blues hold midfielder, okay? So we're going to be focusing on the greens here now. So the Blues hold midfielder, okay, is able to move so that it can be a 3v3 scenario, but the other 2 players aren't. Okay, so you can just nominate 1 player for that. So it's 2v1 in here, so they're 2 centre-backs and the striker. And then we have our players in here, so 6 versus 5. So 3v3 basically when the ball moves across. So the coach will look to play into one of the sides. The greens are looking to manoeuvre the ball. Okay, so move the ball. Okay, try and switch it if they can. And they've got to drive into the final third. Okay, so try and create that space to drive into the final third and then look to score. So then we get support from the opposite side. Can we get players moving forward? Okay, defenders obviously going to be recovering, get bodies behind the ball in case we lose it, and then can be played quickly to get in and score. If we score, retain the ball again. If the Blues win the ball back, okay, they look to receive in the end zone, okay? So they're trying to win it back in here to receive or drive the ball into the end zone. If that happens, the 2 teams can then swap over, or it can be after 3 times that they do it, then they can swap over. So we're not changing too often, okay? It can be after a certain amount of times they get it in the end zone, the teams can look to swap over. After a certain amount of time as well, you can look to remove the grid in here so that the players are getting accustomed to creating space and not all shuffling across one side of the pitch. So what we're trying to focus on is when the ball is in one area, that we've got options to switch the play. Okay, we've got options high and wide, so then we can look to go forward. Whereas if we remove that zone, the players might look to walk them into one area, okay, and leave a load of space out there unoccupied, okay, because everyone's focused on the ball. So lock them in for now to try and create that movement and create that space to switch the play, look to combine, okay, to then look to drive forward to score. What you could also do is put in a little receiving zone in here, so it can be either drive or receive the ball in a zone, which could be across. Again, it could just be 5 yards out of here. So then if they receive the ball in there or drive the ball into there, that's a trigger for us to go and score as well. When we do cross that line, okay, it's important to do things quickly and be clinical. Okay, so keep the passes sharp to then get into an area to score. Not trying to take too many touches, be creative, but at the same time, once we're in there, look to penetrate quickly. Try and make it difficult for these defenders who are recovering to get back and make a challenge by playing at speed, having that tempo quick, movement off the ball to get into the areas and then look to score. So the main focus is moving that ball quickly, looking to create the angle to switch the play and then attack that space which we've created. We will now move into our final animation before concluding this week's session. Thanks for watching this week's video. Don't forget to head over to our website where you can sign up to view all of our exclusive content. And we'll see you next week for another Session Sunday.